Welcome to New Hampshire Politics with John Burt. I'm John Burt. Thank you for joining me today. And today, guess what we're going to do? Let me first introduce our guest, and it's you used to be a state representative, so it's the Honorable, in my eyes, Emily Sandblade.
Well, thank you, John.
Yes, thank you for coming on, Emily, and it's always a pleasure to have you on because I've known you for many years. You're a dear friend, and you've done well for the state.
Well, and John, I have to say that you were the most fun in the State House of anybody I knew there.
Well, thank you. I do enjoy having fun up there.
Oh, yes.
And the biggest reason we're doing the show tonight is election time is coming up, and I have all of the town for Goffstown warrant articles and who to vote for. And what I want to do is I want to go right through, so stay tuned, because I want to touch base on, let me start the clock first. And I want to touch base exactly on how I am going to vote. That's it. It's just how John Burt, citizen down on 7 Bay Street, is going to vote in Goffstown election coming up on March 13th, 2018.
That's next Tuesday.
It is. It's coming quick. So I'd like to go through that list. And then what we're going to do is, the reason I brought Emily in is we're going to talk about Article 26. You have to listen to this, and that's going to be in about 5 minutes. And that is full-time fire. And I am shocked, all of the budget committee, all of the selectmen, even a fireman on the select board, are against this. And we are going to explain why we are against 24-hour fire in Goffstown. Notoriously, you have voted this down, and I pray that you'll do it again. But we'll get to that. And then we are going to talk real quick about article on the town side 10, 17. I'll repeat my vote and how I'm going to vote. And then also on the school side, Article 2 and 3. And Article 3, we're going to get into in depth pretty heavy on that one. And but let me get started. And so hopefully you have a pen. If you don't, get a pen, and I'll, like I said, probably in 10, 12 minutes, we'll be back and I'll repeat how I'm going to vote. But on the election side, Article 1, and this is for the people that are running for different positions. For selectmen, I am going to vote for Collis Adams. I like Collis. I think he does an okay job. I wished he was a little more conservative, but I do like him. I think he serves Goffstown very well. And the other one I'm going to vote for is this Richard, is it Manzo?
Manzo.
Yeah, Manzo.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm not going to vote for the other two is, even though I like Mark LeMay, Kelly Boyer, I don't know who she is. I just heard many things about her, but I like Mark LeMay personally. But being a former fireman and that he works for the fire department now, I think he's too much involved on that. But Kelly Boyer, what I've heard is that she is this is what I heard, that she's she's from Massachusetts. She's a huge Elizabeth Warren. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a meltdown here. If there's any snow on your property, if I was there, it would melt away. That's how big of a meltdown I would have with Elizabeth Warren, and then also a Bernie Sanders fan. And she is a huge supporter, from what I heard, of 24-hour fire in this town, and we don't need it. The other, on the budget committee, it says not more than 4, but who I'm going to vote for is Joe Alexander. I like him, and Jeffrey O'Brien. Those are the only two. The other two, I'm not fans of them. Nothing personal. It's just I don't like their how they vote and their politics, so I'm not going to cast a vote for them. And then on the budget committee, 1 year, make sure you write in Gary Gahan. Is it Gahan?
It's Gahan.
Yeah, Gahan. And that's Gary, and then how you spell his last name is Gahan. And then really the rest of them are all going to get voted in because it's no competition, except for until you get to the planning board. And I am going to vote for Tim Raman, and then also Jane Soderquist. I really like Jane. She's been excellent. She's just a great lady. Tim Redmond, I heard he does a real good job. I don't really know him personally, but a lot of people told me make sure I vote for him. And then also town moderator, I'm going to jump over to that. Rod Stark, he's been here forever. A matter of fact, I'm not sure if they built the town hall around him. Has he been with us that long?
Well, Rodney has been around for a long
He has.
time. But he's a good stalwart. He has been the moderator for a long time. He does a marvelous job at it. He's very precise, very careful.
Yes. Yes, he
Can't
is.
complain.
No. And then on the
Real
trustee,
good guy.
he is. And on the trustee of the trust fund, it says vote for not more than one person. And Scott Gross, my friend Scott Gross, is on there. But you know what? I just don't care for Scott's policies that he likes. And I feel somebody for the trust fund, the trustee of the trust fund, would be a perfect candidate. And he did not ask me to do this. Is I'm writing in Dan Cloutier. He's been on the budget committee, he's been on the school board, and I think he serves the taxpayers. So I hope he doesn't mind if I recommend him, and if he wins, I hope he does a good job for us, which I know he will.
Well, I think that he's very fiscally responsible, and while that's, I hadn't even thought about writing him in at all before I talked to John here, but Dan has got a good reputation as far as how he handles the budgets and how he handles money for the town, and he's very conservative about that. He's very careful.
Yes, yeah.
No problem.
And then Article 2 through 11 is pretty much planning board. Well, I think it is planning board, to be honest.
Yes, it came all out of the planning
all
board.
the planning board. I can't say
Yeah.
it's pretty much. It is the planning board.
Yeah.
I'm going to, vote your conscience, except for, I'm probably going to vote for all of them except for one of them. And the reason is most of them are just housekeeping. It's changing a word, it's defining warehouse, a few other words, so it's pretty harmless. The only one that I didn't like is Article 4, and the reason is because if you have a couple of your green tents or whatever on your property, and I don't know what they're going to do, but they could say that it's against your private property rights, and they could say, well, it's a junkyard, and they're going to make you clean it up. Now, I don't want a junkyard next to me, and I think most people in town are pretty good about that stuff, but I'm just nervous about this particular one, so I guess until I get more clarification of what they say a junkyard is, I'm voting no on 4, and the reason I vote yes on 10, Article 10, make sure you vote yes on that, is because if you have a fireplace or a deck or a porch or something like that, you can replace it without a permit. You don't have to go to the town and say, hey, I want to replace exactly what I have, and then you got to pay money. They're going to do away with that, and I support that, right?
Let me modify that a little bit. You don't have to, if your lot is non-conforming, which many of the lots in Goffstown are, because a lot of houses were in place before the zoning law came into effect in Goffstown. It's been very hard to replace a deck, and decks rot out. It's been hard to replace a porch. And it's been hard to replace other very small structures on your property if it overlapped the setbacks on the property. And there's so many setback problems. That's what makes something non-conformal. That it's just crazy, and people are having to come in to spend $300 on wood, and they'd have to spend $150 getting a zoning board permit or exception or variance in order to just replace their deck, and that's just crazy. I mean, there's no point in that.
So Article 10 would be a yes.
Yeah, and you replace footprint, a footprint for the
Yes.
same thing, and you shouldn't have to get a variance just to do that.
Yeah. And then Article 12 is on the town side again. It's the town budget, and you know what? This year, it's rare. But I listened to my good friend Emily, and she said it is a very sound fiscal budget this time, and I'm going to vote yes. And I'm going to stay with that. And we'll touch a little bit more on that. Article 13, I'm going to vote yes on that, because I think it's a good idea to do that. Just read your articles, but yes on 13, yes on 14. Let me skip over, yes on Article 15. And I will repeat this in a little bit. Article 16 is yes. 17 is no. And the reason is, I think, are we going to talk about that? You know what? We are going to talk about that in a little bit, so let's touch base on that. So I'm going to vote no on that. So if you want to know why, stay tuned on the show. Article 18 is yes. 19 is yes. Article 20 is yes. Article 21 is the Goffstown Main Street. They raise about $52,000 of their own money, and I'm not against the Main Street project, the Goffstown Main Street program, but I just think it should be private funded. They can raise $52,000 now. They don't need our $20,000. I've always voted against that. And the other one is Chrisman's House. I mean, you know, they do some good, but they raise about $65,000, almost $70,000 on their own. You know, the $20,000 that we give them tax money, I'm sure is helpful, but I think they could get the rest of the money without using tax dollars for these type of private programs. So I'm voting no on 22, 23, 24 and 25 are yeses, and 26 is a big no. And right after I get done with the school in about 2 minutes, we're going to be talking about that, so stay tuned. But 26 is the 24-hour fire, and we do not need it. I cannot stress that to you. On the school side, it's Article 1 is who we're going to vote for, and it says vote for not more than 3. There's 4 people, and it's Elaine, how do you pronounce her last name?
Vermokowitz.
Yeah, Vermokowitz. Yeah, that's, you know, but make sure it's last on the ballot. Make sure you vote for her. And then really there's nobody else because they're all going to get in.
Just think of it as Ellen V.
Yes, Ellen V. Yeah, that's how you do it. That's
I'm
good.
sure she'll love that.
And on the Article 2, which is the budget, and Article 3, which is purchase and land, and we're going to talk more about these 2 items a little bit later, is a big fat no on my side. It's just, you know, almost $42 million is, in my eyes, is just a lot of money. You know, there's got to be ways to fix that. So what I want to do is start right in, and like I said, I'll repeat these in a few minutes, but I want to start right in with Article 1. My subject up here is 1, Article 26, which is the fire.
That's the fire department.
Yes, and again, Emily is you're on the planning board in the budget?
No, I'm on the zoning board and the budget committee. I'm a member of both, but I don't speak for either one of them. I'm speaking just on my own behalf.
Okay, so tonight you're just, you're
I'm
Emily
not
Sandblade
an official
citizen.
representative of either one.
Okay, I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah,
that,
they
you
need
know,
to understand that I'm just speaking for myself.
Yes, yeah, no, and I appreciate you coming on. When I called you the other night, you were full of information, and I said, Emily, please, you got to come on and talk to us. And I said, could you come on as yourself? And you said, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, so let's touch base on 26. Why is this a bad idea?
Well, 26 is a warrant article that expands the number of full-time people in the fire department from 12 to 20. It's a 67% expansion of full-timers. What the fire department has been doing for a while is they hire part-timers or fill-ins, and they do on-call. So if there's a fire, people who are on call have to go to that fire, even if it's at 3 in the morning.
Yes.
And they've been doing a combination of things to make sure that we really do have full coverage. And they do keep people in the Church Street station, you know, that big brand new fire station that we're going to pay off the bonds on for a while.
Yes.
For the next 20 some odd years.
Yep.
And we definitely have people down there, but what they really wanted to do, the purpose of what they tried to do, was they wanted to have the Pinardville station open 24 hours a day. And Pinardville is staffed during the day up until 6 p.m., which is when they need it. And, you know, that's when they're getting the most calls, and then they get some calls into the evening. But what happens is that because they've had trouble keeping part-timers around, they haven't been able to fully staff the Pinardville station 24 hours a day all year round, or all week round. And so what they want to do is they want to put full-time people in to do that. Well, the problem is that the Selectmen looked at this problem a few years ago, and we're in about the same state that we were a few years ago as far as the Selectmen are concerned, where they looked at it and they said, well, we really don't need 24-hour fire. And there's a couple of reasons. One is the Church Street station responds, the on-call people respond when there's a fire, and then we have mutual aid, and the mutual aid is the Varney Street station when you need in Pinardville. So when the house that's on Mast Road, close to 114 and 114A, burned about a little over a year ago, it was the Varney people who showed up, Varney Street people who showed up first. And they showed up within less than 5 minutes. I mean, it was that fast a response.
Yes.
And that fire, I heard the sirens go by, which was kind of strange, but it was like at 5 in the morning.
Yeah.
And they were there on top of it, and then the Church Street people came out right after that. So they all got on site pretty fast. So,
Well, the other thing too, Emily, is that they show almost $340,000 cost for these.
that's only for 6 months.
That's what you want to remember.
that-
It's only for 6 months, so that's really 340, and 340 is what, 680, and I guarantee you that 680,
It's going to be
680,
higher than that
yeah, it'll
by
be
the
close
time.
to $1 million.
We're going to be pushing that because then you'll have to include training, future training. You're going to
Yeah.
have to additional, equipment and benefits and everything. So it's going to really expand considerably.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's a danger to this particular thing is this particular warrant article, and that's number 26, is that if it goes through, then the budget next year will already include that, and it kind of gets stuck in the budget, and it's very hard to cut that out after that. And it just gets stuck in by default, and that's really, really bad. So once you vote for this and you put it in, you're stuck with it pretty much.
No.
It's very, very hard to get rid of it.
Now, could you explain the not recommended by the Board of Selectmen 5-0 and Budget Committee 11-0? That's almost unheard of.
Absolutely. The Board of Selectmen voted completely against this, and they almost never vote completely against anything. And then the Budget Committee followed up and voted completely against this, and this is very unusual for the Budget Committee.
Yeah.
So,
Because you got a few members that could spend every nickel that in my pocket, couldn't you?
oh, we certainly do.
Yes.
In fact, most of, I hate to say, but a good many of them could.
And so they voted against this because they see the issue with it.
Yeah, they see an issue with it. They really don't think that this is necessary, but the friends of the fire department and relatives of people in the fire department pretty much got the signatures for the warrant article to put it on the ballot, and that's why it's there. It's not there because the Budget Committee wanted it. It's not there because the selectmen wanted it. It's there just because the people involved with the fire department want it.
Yeah. Well, then, so let's jump to Article 10, which I think we covered most of it, and that was, on the town side, and that was the
That's the one
replacing
that
the
allows
decks
people
and
to
stuff.
replace things. And basically what it means is it just removes some of the barriers to, and some of the cost, which is really not reasonable at all, to doing minor repairs on, very minor repairs on a house that, say, maybe an older home or doesn't conform to the zoning code as it is right now. And the zoning code came in 1961 after a lot of houses in town were built, and a lot of houses don't fit the zoning code, but we don't want to really force these people, if they're trying to keep up their places, we don't want to force them to have to spend a lot of extra money just to do a little bit of maintenance.
Well, what I liked what you said was that they spend $200 on lumber, or $300, whatever you said,
Yeah.
on lumber to replace some boards.
And then they have to get $150 to permit, a variance or something. and
So make
that's just crazy.
sure you vote for Article 10.
Well,
definitely.
and I think it'll help the appearance of the town, because when you really put a barrier in the way of people, it
Yes.
really means that they're going to be more reluctant to maintain their houses.
Yeah.
And I see that as a real problem as
then-
far as quality.
Article 17 is a huge problem, that we are looking at, and I'm glad that you explained this. And it says, even though it is, the selectmen again, sadly they voted for it, and the Budget Committee voted 10-2. So you had at least one friend when you were there,
Yes.
and that voted against it because there's some good reasons to vote against Article 17.
Well, and I voted against it on general principle. What it is the selectmen have reason to want to buy land occasionally for the town. Like, for instance, one of the things they want to do is they want to have more parking around downtown.
Yeah.
Because parking's a little bit tight, and they really want to make sure that the downtown area is accessible to people with cars, and that's understandable. I'm fine with that. But what the problem is that generally under state law, what happens is if the selectmen want to purchase a piece of land, they have to run it by the voters, and it has to go on the voter, the town election.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
It becomes an article on the town election every year. And what happens is that if they do that, then they have to wait some period of time after they want to buy it until they can actually get it. And that might be inconvenient because the piece of land might sell.
Yes.
That can happen. And it is a problem, there's no question about it. But the real problem that I see, and I think that it tends to trump that inconvenience, is the simple fact that in a lot of towns where that's happened, it's been terribly abused.
Yes.
Where somebody wants to unload a piece of land and they can't get the price that they want, and they unload it on the town.
But then it's off the tax rolls too, right?
And it also goes off the tax rolls.
Once the town owns it.
That's one of the problems.
Yeah.
And so, but I think it really opens the door to potential abuse, and I don't like taking the right of the taxpayers and the voters away to approve land purchases by the town and just invest it in a small board.
Yes, yes.
And I do have a problem with that. I think that it's very transparent and
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And I'd like to run through, so hopefully you have a pen now to go through the warrant articles again. Excuse me. So I'd like to start off with Article 1, which is the election part on the town side. This is all town. And I'm going to vote for Collis Adams and Richard Manzo. And then in the Budget Committee, Joe Alexander. And then on the Budget Committee for 1 year is Gary Gahan. He's a real good guy. Planning Board is Tim Redmond. It's Timothy Redmond, Jan Soderquist. And then, of course, Rodney Stark. And then on the Trustee of the Trust Fund, they have Scott Gross, but I am going to write in Dan Cloutier, and hopefully Dan can fulfill that, which I know he would if he got elected. Articles 2 through 11 is all Planning Board, and I am voting yes on all of them, except for Article 4. Article 4 is the only one I'm going to vote against because I want more clarification of what the town says is a junkyard. So pretty much, but Article 10, make sure you vote yes. Article 12, yes. 13, 14 is a yes. Article 15, 16 is a yes, and Article 17 is a big no. That's just a bad situation. Article 18, 19, and 20 are yeses. And Article 21 is a no, and that's the Goffstown Main Street. Nothing against the program, as well as Crispin's House, but I just don't think tax dollars should be used for private private things. Article 23, 24, and 25 are yeses, and 26 is a big no. That's the 24-hour fire, and even the selectmen and all of the Budget Committee and all of the selectmen voted no on that. So please join us on that one and say no. And on the school side, I am voting for Ellen
Ellen V.
Yes, Ellen V. Because I am terrible with it. I gotta meet up with her and have her tell me how to say her name. And then that's pretty much there. And then no on Article 2 and Article 3. So what I'd like to do is jump to the school side and talk about what Article 6 is. And Article 3. Let's talk about Article 2 first, if you want, and get that out of the way.
Well, we can mention that briefly.
Yeah, why don't we get rid of that real quick, if
Article
that's okay.
2 is the school budget for the year.
Yeah. And
I'm not going to recommend people vote yes or no on it, and I'll explain why. And the reason is remember that they had this $9.1 million surplus that they discovered that had been building since 2011
Yes.
in the budget, and they just found it when it got audited, and it hadn't popped out before that.
Well, and a person resigned over it.
Well, a person resigned. There's rumors that there may be more in there, but they're rumors. I don't credit them yet with any validity, but I think it's something that needs to be looked at, and they're undergoing an audit right now. But the school superintendent refused to release the audit that had been done, and Peter Gigantis, the selectman who's also the selectman's representative on the budget committee, has asked for that audit for months. He's been trying to get it for months,
Really?
and they have refused to release it. That was Superintendent Balke has refused to release
Can
it.
he pull a 91A?
I'm thinking about pulling the 91A.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is. But it's been very problematic what's going on there fiscally. And unfortunately, the current budget reflects that extra, padding,
Yes.
built in. And no matter how you vote, you're going to vote for that padding, because it turns out the default budget, which is the budget that gets kicked in, even if the school board or if the current school budget doesn't get approved, also represents that kind of padding, and
Yes.
it wasn't revised in time for the ballot because there's deadlines for when you have to approve budget and things, and all this was coming up just as the deadlines were being reached to modify anything. So this
And I
budget,
wonder if that was done by design.
I have no idea,
Yeah.
but the way things have been coming up is it's just been really quite alarming what's going on there.
Yes.
And it's gotten my spidey senses tingling, I'll tell
Oh,
you.
yes.
It concerns me a great deal because I really do feel that the current school administration really isn't very much in charge of their finances very well.
No, they're not.
I don't think they really understand what they're looking at, and I think that they're tending to do bookkeeping without really understanding their system very well. And there's reasons that are involved. In fact, Dan Cloutier told me about some of those reasons.
Yes, yeah.
So he was really quite helpful in helping me understand what was going on there.
But then on Article 3 is a huge no, and I think most of the town is going to vote no on this one. I really believe that they just don't see the benefits at this point because, for one, I don't think the land's worth what they want.
Well, there are problems with that. Number one, the land may not be worth what they think it is, but the main problem is that the school superintendent is basically saying we should buy this because it would be a good thing to have.
Yes.
And when we've pressed him on what do you intend to do with it, well, in the budget committee, he told us that they had several plans. They wanted to put on athletic fields. They eventually wanted to move, possibly move Bartlett School and Maple Avenue School over there behind the high school, and they wanted to put school administrative buildings there eventually, maybe. These are all maybes, but they were proposing that as a possibility. But they have nothing definite really planned for this, but they just want to buy the land.
Yeah.
And if any business approached, a land purchase that way or any major capital purchase that way, they wouldn't be in business long. I mean,
Yes.
it's one of those things where you don't say, well, I think it's just a real good idea. And he sold it to, this got rushed into the budget committee at the very last minute, on the very last day that the budget committee could approve something like this. We got no notice it was coming in, and it was just launched on us suddenly, and we were pushed to approve it. And people approved it. I voted against it, but people approved it on the basis of we should let the voters get a chance to vote on this.
Well, they didn't
They
do that
didn't approve it
on,
necessarily
yeah.
because they thought it was a good idea, but the argument was, and people can go back and watch the meeting, but the argument that pretty much swayed people was, let's let the voters vote on this.
Yeah.
And of course the voters don't, this is being pushed on them suddenly, so there's not been a lot of discussion about the problems with this particular thing. But the biggest single problem is that the school district and the school board has no definite idea of what they want to do with it. It's just, we want to buy it because it was nice to have and they're not making any more land.
Yes.
So he's appealing to people's sense of the fear of missing out on something. And it's like, hurry up and buy this so that we'll have it when we need it.
Well, and it's also a wetlands back there.
It's about 30% wetlands. It's a fairly rugged terrain in areas, so in order to do anything with it, it's going to take quite a job to terraform it.
Yeah.
And so far, developers that have looked at it have turned it down. And the reason that I've heard that they've turned it down is because their engineering studies showed that it would take so much to make it into like a residential neighborhood, a development, that they just couldn't make a reasonable profit at all off of it. They were very concerned about that.
Wow.
And that's a story that I've heard.
Yes.
Now, I don't have access to the engineering studies, so I can't say for sure, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
So it's a problem. I think the purchase of this is a problem. The other thing that isn't being taken into account is the simple fact that enrollment is due to decline. Right now, we're looking at the grade school numbers in both New Boston and in Goffstown, and if you combine them together and assume that that's what's coming up to the high school, in about 6 years, we're going to have about a 10% drop in enrollment in the high school itself. And the birth rate is such that we're going to have and this is happening all through New Hampshire. I mean, every school district is seeing this, is the birth rate is going down and people are just not having as many kids to educate. And we're looking at doing an expansion just as we're looking at the schools going down.
Yeah.
And then you in the House have been passing bills that allow people to send their kids to schools outside the public school district.
Absolutely.
And that's going to divert more kids away from the public school.
Well, and Dunbarton left us several years ago.
Dunbarton left, and there's just a lot of issues going on. more people are homeschooling, and so enrollments are going down over time, and this is a definite trend.
Yes.
And yet here we're being proposed to that we just continue to expand, and that just flies in the face of reality.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's very difficult.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for explaining all this, because I think it was very informational, especially on the two main topics is Article 26 on the town side and Article 3
on the school side.
On the school side, which really should be a no.
Yeah.
And, and I hope the voters do that.
Well, I hope so too, because even though it's only for I think $695,000 is a lot of money.
It is.
It's going to add quite a bit onto your property taxes for the year, and you're going to know about it.
And you don't know what the the property tax on that.
The property tax on that, I did look it up, and it was around. I think it's somewhere around 3,000 or 4,000, but part of it is zoned agricultural right now.
Okay.
And agricultural zoning gets very low property tax, and it wasn't particularly high. It's totally undeveloped, so undeveloped land doesn't get taxed terribly.
Oh, okay.
But it was I looked it up. It was a few $1,000s, some number of thousands of dollars, under 10,000 somewhere.
Yeah.
And so it's not huge on the tax base, but the thing we need to stress is when you buy it, the purchase of the land is just the start.
Yes.
It's going to take millions more to do some of the things that they want to do.
Yeah.
And that's very problematic.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the tax rates are going to rise immensely.
Well, and I think
in the
there's
long
other
run on
land,
this one.
to address Bartlett. There's other land that, or even right in Bartlett, just rebuild the school.
You can rebuild the school. There's some land available still in the Pinardville area,
There
but
is.
it's a lot better to keep the school in Pinardville where the parents can remain involved. It's much easier
Yes.
for the parents to stay involved. And schools where the parents are involved run much better than the ones that aren't.
Absolutely.
And then I have a hesitation, and there's been other people who have mentioned this. I don't really like the idea of putting a grade school next to a high school. And
Yeah, that's true.
as our superintendent has informed us, the high school does have somewhat of a drug problem.
Yep.
Some of the kids have drug problems. And frankly, I think if you put the grade school right next to the high school, I think you're going to see some of that cross over.
Yes.
And that's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing to have happen.
And even
I
though
just
you
don't
put a
like,
fence up.
Yeah, I don't like that kind of cross influence.
Yes.
That potential for cross influence.
Yeah, I would agree.
It really bothers me a great deal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate all your help, and you do a great service for us while you're on the the boards, and keep up the good
Yeah,
work.
I'd like to encourage more people who are concerned about these things to run for those boards in town,
Yes.
because we usually don't have much of a competition in these offices, and
Yes.
we really need them.
Yeah. And again, you do sit on two boards.
I sit on two boards. I
but-
sit on both the zoning board and the budget committee, but I'm not speaking for either
Yes.
one of them. I'm
You-
not an official representative.
You're just here as a citizen of Goffstown.
Yeah, and
as
just
my
because I
friend.
sit on the two boards,
Yes.
I basically pay more attention than most people.
That's why I wanted you on.
Yeah, but that's the only benefit.
You're the brains of the show right now.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, thank you for watching, and I will be YouTubing this, and so if you want to find it up there, just look at my YouTube channel, New Hampshire Politics with John Burt. And if you want to give me a call or anything, just look me up. You can find me, and I'll answer what I can. And until next week, thank you. Talk to you later. Bye now.